All right, and it looks like we're recording now. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself for those that don't know me. My name is Becky Wallen. I'm the Field to Fork Coordinator for the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. During a typical season, we're having really awesome in-person classes together, and we're learning hands-on about deer hunting and turkey hunting and dove hunting and squirrel hunting in Kentucky. But this year we had to do it a little bit different, just like everyone else, because of COVID. So we thank you for joining the Field to Fork webinar series. Tonight we're going to be talking about e-scouting, which is kind of a new topic in hunting. It can be a little bit intimidating. So we're going to really break it down and start at the basics tonight. Learn how to digitally scout before you hit the woods. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen here with you all. Okay, so hopefully you all can see my PowerPoint. All right, so to begin, let's start with some definitions to get everybody on the same page. I'm going to be throwing out some terminology this evening, and I don't want anybody to feel left behind. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is slope, and that's just the steepness or the degree of incline of a surface. Then the aspect, which we usually talk about slope and aspect together, is the orientation of the slope, or which direction does the slope face. We're going to be talking about base maps, and those are just reference maps on which you overlay other data, and this helps you get a really good visual representation on what might be actually on the Earth's surface. A map layer is that data that I talked about you overlay on top of your base map. And though they can be themed data like roads or hiking trails or buildings, and it just helps build that total picture of what's on the ground. A waypoint is a set of coordinates that you use as reference. So a lot of people just talk about dropping points or GPS locations, and folks use these to mark things like their deer blind, or if they found a really nice rub, or if they found a deer bed or a bedding area, or a really big oak tree with a lot of deer sign under it. You can drop waypoints for all of that so that you remember where those locations are. And the last thing is WMA, which is a wildlife management area, and that's the public land that we have in Kentucky that I'll be discussing. So what is e-scouting? First of all, I mentioned that it's digital scouting, and basically you're pairing ecological information that you know about the game species that you're trying to hunt, and physical maps and digital satellite imagery to outline a focus area before you hit the ground and actually go to where you're planning on scouting or hunting. Some benefits of e-scouting are that you can narrow down where you want to start scouting, because when you first look at some of our WMAs, you might say, oh my gosh, that's 8,000 acres. Where am I going to start? So you can do a little bit of research through e-scouting and pick out some focus areas that optimize your time in the field, minimize how many trips you're going to be taking out there, which is going to save you gas and time. And it limits the disturbance in the area. So if you're constantly tromping around in the area that you're going to be hunting, you may end up changing an animal's normal patterns, which you don't necessarily want to do. So you kind of eliminate that issue too. And when you take a look at an area before you set foot on it and try to really get oriented with it, and you have this mental picture already built up, then you're going to feel more confident when you drive up to that location and you get out of your car and you're ready to go, I promise that this definitely boosts your confidence before you hit the field. Okay, some things to think about first. You want to focus on what does that animal need. So food, water, shelter are its basic needs, right? And then think about the arrangement of those needs on the landscape. So if you can answer these questions, like what specific food does it need? Where does that food grow? What does it look like on satellite imagery? And I'll try and talk a little bit more about this just in a minute. And what do animals need the most when you're going to be hunting them? Because that does change over time. A deer's needs will change over time from between the beginning of archery season in September and the rut that's usually in November, and then post-rut in December. So you want to have all of that already in mind before you start looking at a place to hunt. And then keeping in mind slope faces, because that can affect a lot of things like the immediate habitat, and then that affects how the animal uses that area. All right, so we're gonna dive right into how to find this information and how to use it. Give me just a second to transfer over to my other screen. All right, so now we're looking at the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife resource webpage. There's a ton of information on here. I definitely encourage you to check it out. But what we're going to focus on tonight, up here at the top, and I think you can see my cursor, is the Maps tab. So we're going to start there because we're mostly interested in digital maps tonight. And really quick, we're going to skip the first thing on the list and come back to it. But finding where you want to go, let's start with the Wildlife Management Areas, Public Hunting Areas link. And right away, we get a ton of information, which includes the comprehensive list of the WMAs and some other properties that are open to public access in Kentucky. So it's a super long list. It's in alphabetical order, and you can see right away that you can select one of these, and you'll go right to the PDF map that has been created by the agency of that area. Now, you already have some useful information with the PDF maps, like very clear boundary lines. You can see everything that's really clear to see on the inside of this polygon, in the inside of this shape. That's the WMA, and that's the area within the boundary line. It also has the parking area really well outlined. There's another one up top, and then you've got some roads. And if you're ever curious, like, what does the black dotted line actually mean? Well, just come on down to the legend of the map. Now, I will say the legend for all the WMA maps is the same. So it has more on the legend than you actually need for for different properties. So that's just to keep it consistent. And right now we can jump right here and see that the black dotted line is a WMA foot trail. So that's a trail that you'll be able to walk. And usually these are pretty great trails that are like old logging roads. So this is the legend. It has everything you need, everything that's on the map, maybe some things that aren't, but are on other maps. Oops. And then some other information that's on the PDF is the location and size of the WMA. So for those of you that have little screens tonight, I'll show you that the location says Kenton County, and it has 259 acres at this Mullins WMA. It also gives us a contact number, so you'll be able to reach out to a property manager if you want to and ask them questions specifically about the property. It has some elevation information, which might be good to know before you head out, especially if you've never been there before, and entrance coordinates for your GPS, which if you don't have experience entering the longitude, latitude coordinates into Google Maps, it does work. You just include the decimals. Another really cool feature here is the area habitat. It talks about that it's mostly forest, about 17% open land, 83% forest. There's no wetlands on this WMA, and there's no open water on this WMA. Gives you directions on how to get there. Talks about the terrain, that it's rolling, some steep hills, woods, and grasslands. So tons of information packed in on this PDF that is, you can download it, you can print it. This is my go-to for taking a paper map with me to the field, which is super important. You don't want to solely rely on technology, right? Most of the time it works. Sometimes it doesn't. You're in the field. You might drop your phone. You might step on it. If the battery might die. Anything can happen. So take a paper map with you, and it wouldn't hurt to take a compass if you know how to use that too. All right, let's go back to the web page at fw.ky.gov, and remember we're under the Maps tab. We're going to go back up to the top here and check out the Wildlife Management Area Public Land Search. So this is super cool. Another comprehensive list, some quick click buttons here, some really quick information up top. You can search by county. So maybe you don't know the name of the property that you want to go to, but you want to just see what's close to you. So let's say, for instance, we live in, and you might, I don't, but I probably would if I had the chance. Oh, where's Carter County? That's a pretty area of the state out in Eastern Kentucky. So here are the WMAs and the public land that's open near Carter County. It tells you what activities are open on those properties, and you can get directions super quick on Google Maps. Maybe you don't know the county that you want to go to, but you know that you want to go to an area that allows hunting. So you can actually just click the icon here, and it narrows down. It's kind of hard to see right away, but it narrows down to all the properties that are available to hunting. And then maybe you want to go to a property that also has a shooting range. So you can also select that icon, and it narrows it down even farther. Now, these are all the properties all across the state. So you want to double check the location and see if it's near you, or maybe you're looking to explore new places in the state, and you'll be able to see right there really quickly where these places are located. All right, so I know I'm going super quick, but we have tons of information to cover tonight. I want to make sure I can get it all out for you guys. Let's go back to the Maps tab. And I think that was everything. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the interactive maps. So there's an interactive map link here that's going to take us to the ArcGIS version of the interactive map. We have two versions. This is the ArcGIS, and you can see this has little stars where all the public access entrances are. And when you click on the star, it shows the name of the property. So this is Peabody WMA. It gives you the longitude, latitude, and it gives you a link for more information. You can zoom to it. It tells you how many acres it is. When you click on more information, it takes you back to the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife website and provides information specifically just for that WMA, which can include other online resources, the PDF map, and a bunch of other information that might be interesting and useful for you. So this is a pretty good way to look at all of the public hunting area entrances and access points just across the state. It just gives you a different representation. The other option for the interactive map, which has a couple more features, is on the Kentucky GeoNet. All right, and so right away you can see there's a lot more information here. It's laid out a little bit differently, but it still has everything that the last interactive map had. I like to play around with this version of the interactive map on the Kentucky GeoNet. First thing, you can zoom to an activity. So when I click on this, I can say, okay, I want to go to a public hunting area entrance. And then it gives you a list of all the places that have one of those. Now, again, you probably already have a place in mind if you're using this option. Same thing for boating access, wildlife viewing, the public water, blue water trails, anything like that. Same deal, you can just click on that layer and zoom to it. You'll have the legend as well. So it tells you what all these symbols mean that are on the map. And then you have your layers list. And fortunately, it kind of selects the layers for you, so you don't have to worry about this as much here. But I will tell you that some maps, some applications overload you with information. So watch when I turn on the rest of the layers. It's so busy, it's so ugly, it's not really useful. So just start turning layers off if you get to a map that's too busy, and it can really narrow down what you're looking at. It can make it a little bit more user-friendly. So those are layers. Remember, our base map is underneath, and our information about the area in the layers is stacked on top. You also have the option to select different base maps. And so why would this be interesting to you at all? Well, right away, and let's go to a specific place here. I am gonna go to, sorry here, just one second. Let's go over here. This is Grayson Lake WMA. So when you zoom in, you start to see a little bit more information on the map. And that includes topographic lines, which you could see here on the base map. And then if you zoom in even farther, then you're looking at satellite imagery data. So you can actually select, say, okay, I want the topographic lines back. Then you can select the Commonwealth topo map, and boom, there they are. And you can zoom in and see your reference lines. If you're not familiar with topographic maps, these reference lines are more thick than the other topographic lines on the map, and they always have a number. And that tells you what the elevation is at this point on the map. So this is 900 feet above sea level. And then the closer that the lines are, we can actually see some that are fairly close right here. That means it's a steep incline or decline. When you start to see them farther apart, it's more gradual and not as steep. And then when you see the circles that you can actually connect the lines and they get smaller and smaller, you're looking at a hilltop or a point, a tall point on the map. So that's very quick topo map reading 101. Now, say you're not interested in a topo map, you just want to see the satellite imagery. Well, there's a couple of different options, and you might wonder, okay, why does it matter what year the images were captured? Well, sometimes the landscape changes, right? So different things happen, and on our WMAs, you can actually see where our wildlife managers are doing things like clear cutting timber or putting in a food plot or things of that nature, or where there was an old field So we could go to, and this area isn't necessarily the best example because there's not a lot of changes here, but we can use the 2006 data and compare it to the 2019 data to get a little bit of a better picture on how the landscape has been changing over time. Why is this important to you as a hunter? Well, for deer especially, if there was an old field that they've let grow back, then you're looking at, early on, you're looking at good food habitat. So that's really attractive places where they'll be feeding. And then about 10 years later, you're looking at excellent bedding and really great cover during the day. So don't discard that kind of information. It's very helpful to you as a hunter. All right, some other cool features in this interactive map. You can print the map once you get to a place that you like, that you think is interesting. You can draw on these maps from this interactive site. You can drop a point. You can draw a straight line. You can draw a polyline, which is just a line with multiple straight angles like this. And you double tap to end. And you can tell there's the prompt that kind of helps you use these different tools. So it's super user-friendly. Let's go ahead and clear that. And then you can do the free-handed polyline. So say you were really specific about the shape of this trail, which I'm not super great with a mouse, but it allows you to be a little bit more detailed with that. And had I can actually turn on the length measurement, and I am going to do miles. So if I wanted to know how long this path was right here, then I can draw my freehand polyline and sticking to it just a little bit. There you go. When I let go, when I'm done with my polyline, it automatically shows me in black text that the length that was almost a half a mile. So that can be really helpful when you're looking at a place and you say, okay, I have to park here. I want to walk into the back of this road. How far am I going to be walking? Or maybe more importantly, how far am I going to be dragging my deer out after I've been a successful hunter? So really good tool right there. And of course, you can share your map with all your hunting buddies or your mentor and ask their advice. So this interactive map with Kentucky GeoNet is a really great tool for you to use to start digitally scouting. And you can see here that the property lines for the WMA are very clear. You can see that the hunting access, that is the limited hunting access, is really well marked in red. So there's no hunting in the red zone, but everything else is green, which means you can hunt at any point on that property in the green. Always double check. This is a great segue. Always double check the information at the fw.ky.gov website for each property that you plan on hunting, because some properties do have limitations like this, like certain areas are only open for quota hunts. So when we go back to this information, that's where you're going to find those restrictions. It's all going to be under here under regulations. So you're going to be able to find all the specific stuff for that area. Very important to double check. All right. So let's go back to the one that we skipped under the Maps tab, the game maps. The managers of these specific species have put together some really awesome maps that are both in PDF options that you can download or print, and then also interactive maps that you can use on the ArcGIS interface. So just to show you what I mean, right here you can see the bear zones, And remember the ArcGIS option for the interactive maps, that's where all of this information is built into. And we do all this in-house. So it is always up to date, always very accurate, and really good information, depending on what species you're looking to hunt. Okay. So that is the most important information that I wanted to share with you off of the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources website. I will say that some of it is kind of repetitive. This download maps and GIS data, that's the interactive map that we were looking at, the Kentucky Geo Network map. And then the public hunting browser was the ArcGIS map that we were looking at. The last thing I'm going to show you right here under mobile apps, Kentucky Public Hunting ArcGIS Explorer mobile app instructions is a PDF of instructions that I have personally used, are very straightforward, on how to download a mobile app to your phone that has all of the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources public lands information built into it. So you do have to search, but it explains how to find the information once you download the app. So that's an option, and it is free. It does have pretty nice applications and tools within it. Just something to check out if you want to. All right, so I have to stop sharing that screen, and we're going to jump over and talk about Google Earth. It's another place that I frequent, another useful tool that I use quite a bit. All right, so I've already searched, which was very easy, the Clay WMA, Clay Wildlife Management Area in Carlisle, Kentucky. And the reason I selected this spot is because I wanted to bring up again the Google Earth has an option where you can see historical imagery as well. So that's this little clock with the arrow that turns counterclockwise. When you select this, you can drag the arrow here backwards and kind of go back in time, which I know I just did really fast, but let me go all the way back to the first data that we have here. And this data is from 1995. And how do I know that? Well, the date is right up top and it moves above the cursor that I'm dragging. So this is 1995, and just check out this area. You can see that it's kind of clear. It's along the roads here. We've got some large fields. It looked like there was some field work going on here and here. So as we come to earlier data, then there wasn't a whole lot of change there in 2005, but let's jump forward to 2008, and you can kind of see that this stuff starts filling in, right? Remember the roads that we could see here? They're no longer visible. So you know that this stuff was allowed to grow up, and you know about how old it is. So how long have they been letting it grow, which can give you a good idea on how thick it is and how the animals might be using it, and what species might be using it. So jump forward to 2013. You can see it's even thicker. They really have let all this grow up, and then on up to the most recent data that was captured, which is from 2016. So you can see that there. All of these bottoms and these fields have grown up and are going to look a lot different than they used to. It's going to tell you, again, what the animals might be using it for. So in this amount of time, you're probably looking at a little bit thicker, but not so thick that I would call it bedding area. But maybe I would start looking for some young oak stands and things like that. So really cool tool right there. Let's let's see. Oh, another thing before we dive into all the other tools on Google Earth, there is an option to turn on and off layers. And so I already have quite a few of them turned off because I don't like all the clutter on my map. So that's just an option there. If you get on Google Earth and you're like, holy cow, I don't need to see all this, just turn it off. No big deal. Or if you're like, well, where are the roads? I want to know what the roads, where they are and what their names are. Just turn the roads layer on top of your base map. So going through all of the tools at the top, because I use almost every single one of them. This little push pin, you can add a place marker, and you can drag this place marker anywhere on the map, and you can go enter coordinates if you already have some, latitude and longitude coordinates. You can choose what the icon looks like. So I like to use blue icons for water. Actually, there's like a little wave icon here, so that's pretty cool. If I find like a pond that is so small and maybe it's in a wooded area that I couldn't see from the satellite imagery, but I took a GPS point, then I'll throw this in here. Or if I found a small creek crossing, I'll throw this in there. Anything you want, you can label them, you can change their colors. I'll let you guys explore. But the number one thing that I really like about this option is that you can add local images. And so I love taking pictures while I'm in the field because it helps me go back in my memory and say, okay, what did I actually see on the ground? Now, I know we've transitioned from physically scouting to post physically scouting, but these applications can be used both ways. So I'm just wanted to let you know all the options. So if I took any pictures in the field, say I took some pictures of this field particularly, then I could save those images to my computer and then add the local images to this pin. And when I hover over or click this pin, all of the images will pop up. So that's pretty awesome. You can also add a polygon. Remember, that's just a shape, and you can track how large. You can see how many square miles it is within that space. Or maybe you don't need square miles and you can change that to whatever you want. How many feet, how many yards. You can figure out how big a field is, something like that. You can also do paths. So just like we did on the interactive map, same thing. You can overlay an image, which I won't talk too much about. This is something I've used a lot for turkey hunting especially, but definitely still useful for deer. This is the little tool that has like two hills and the sun coming above it. It shows you how the sunlight moves across the landscape. So let me just grab my little marker here. So this is actually from yesterday until today, and it gives you the date and the time. So let's go back. This is 6 p.m. So check out the shadows on the landscape at 5 p.m. Why is this important to know? Well, remember we talked about aspect, the way that the slopes are facing and how that affects the habitat on those slopes. So in Kentucky, well, at least in the parts of Kentucky that have hills, you might be in the flat parts, there's a few. This is pretty interesting because typically they talk about, okay, deer come out in the morning to feed. They're probably going to come to the sun, especially if it's been really cold. Same thing, I've noticed the same thing at night. They wound up being in the sunny fields right before dark, especially if it's going to get cold at night. So this might help you determine where you want to set up. And another thing, you don't necessarily want to set up where, oh my gosh, the sun tops that hill in front of you and it's blinding you and your hunt is over because you can't see anything, and it's going to blind your scope or whatever equipment you're using. It's happened to the best of us, I promise. So check out the way that the sun moves across the landscape before you set up. That way you're not being blinded or you're not being illuminated, and the deer or the whatever game species you're targeting sees every shiny piece of metal that's on your equipment. So keep all this in mind before you set up. You can measure, just like on the other interactive map. We can go down here and we can say, okay, so I parked back here because I don't want the deer to spook at my truck. And I want to know how far I have to walk if I'm going to take this path and travel down to the corner of the field here and set up. So it's telling me 0.15 miles or 770 feet. So again, how far am I walking in? How far am I dragging my deer out? Another great tool there. Okay. And then of course you can print your map if you've built in and you've got a bunch of points and you've got some paths that you want to take. You can print it. You can make a PDF and save the image or view it in Google Maps. All kinds of great options there. So I think that's everything in Google Earth. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen really quick. Talk about a few more things to keep in mind before you start e-scouting and you start diving into these tools. Make sure you know where some vehicle routes are. Those are certain things that you want to be looking for. Corridors that the game animals will be using to move across the landscape. Look at the landscape features on the map, and actually we can go back to Google Earth to look at some of these. All right, so you can use that shadow, the sunlight, to kind of pick out where some ridge tops are, right? And that might be a place that you identify as an interesting location to start scouting. So you also should be looking for pinch points in different corridors. You might be able to see power lines cut through certain locations. All of that really attractive for deer. All right. Okay, so we talked about making sure we're focusing on one element at a time to make things a little bit more digestible on your map. So turning off a couple layers, maybe just looking at one at a time. That's really going to help keep the noise down and allow you to build that map from the ground up. We already talked about knowing the different regulations on different properties. That's really important. And taking a backup map, a printed map as a backup map. And you can also, you could laminate the map and use dry erase markers or to write on that. I've seen people do that. I like a more committed style. So I print my paper map and use permanent markers. And then I take it back home and I look at all my scribbles that I've made and all my notes, and I take all my pictures and I build this map that maybe I've only visited a property one time, but because I pre-scouted digitally and then was able to make a trip well early before season to see what's actually out there and do a little ground truthing. So you're just making sure that what's on the satellite imagery is actually on the ground. Making some notes, then I feel very confident about the next time that I enter that property and go in for my hunt. I just want to make sure we're caught up here. Okay, the last thing I'm going to show you here are some helpful app features that you might want to consider when you're buying apps. I know I didn't talk about specific apps a lot tonight, and that's because there's just so many of them, and they all offer different things. They're all great, honestly. Some cost money, some don't. But if you're shopping around for a good hunting app, maybe keep some of these things in mind. Are the maps downloadable for offline? That's probably the most important feature that you want to make sure your mobile app has, because once you get outside away from Wi-Fi, you want to make sure that you can still view where you are. And the only way to do that is to have the map already downloaded to your phone. So make sure that's an option. It might be nice to have multiple map layer options as well. So some apps have the ability to look at satellite imagery as the base map and overlay topography lines on top of that. So that gives you a really good idea on what the landscape looks like. Make sure that the data you're looking at is up to date. The base map, remember we talked about when the images are captured. Make sure you know that it's up to date. You might want to be able to easily copy and paste coordinates. That would be helpful. And make sure that the information is easily transferable between different applications or different platforms. So like from your desktop to your PC to your phone, that's really helpful. Once you're in the field, you want to make sure that you can drop waypoints or the little pins that we talked about, draw a path or have it track your path as you walk, or add photographs as you go through. The more that you can find in an app, the less work you have to do later. It's also nice to be able to make sure that the information is shareable. So like we talked about, talking with other people about the area that you're looking at, getting others' opinions or sharing it with your hunting buddies or sharing it with landowners if you're not the only hunter out there on the property, letting him know or them know where you're interested in going or where you plan to set up your blind. Printing and exporting options is another feature you're going to want to use. And then some nice apps have wind direction icons that let you know which way the wind is going to be blowing, which is helpful when you're deer hunting, right? And also other weather information. Now, obviously you could take this whole list and break it into probably 100 apps. But like I said, when you're shopping for a good hunting app, you want to see how many of these you can check off in one-stop shop. All right, and I have some additional resources that I will be sharing with you folks. I think I can go ahead and copy this and paste it into the comments, but I'll also send it in the follow-up email with the survey. These are some really nice videos that I used and continue to use when I'm e-scouting. So I will post that now. And looks like they're all there. So there you go. But like I said, I'll send those again. And so Olivia, do we have any questions? We just covered a ton of information.
No, we do not at this time. There was a question, I had answered it though. David had wondered if we're able to have any in-person workshops next year to kind of make up for this year. And definitely we will do our best to have any Field of Forks in person next year if we're able to. Trust me, me and Becky are ready to have some in-person classes by now for sure. But we'll definitely keep you guys posted and can keep track of our Facebook page as well.
Yes, so thank you for mentioning the Facebook page. You're all going to get an invitation if you're not already a member of our department managed closed group called the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife Legacy Group. And that's for all the participants that have been to any Field of Forks, or maybe you went to a Becoming an Outdoorswoman program or a Hook and Cook program, and you've attended some of these webinars. You can join this closed group to continue learning with other new hunters and anglers. And we've also got mentors in the group, like myself and Olivia, and Roger is a mentor in the group. And you can feel free to ask questions and get feedback from folks that have been hunting or fishing or just enjoying the outdoors for a really long time. So it's a great place to join if you're not already. I'll be sending that as well. Also, if you're interested in keeping the most up to date with any upcoming Field of Fork workshops or webinars that we might do in the future, make sure you keep an eye, and I'll throw it in the chat here, at fw.ky.gov/Field Fork all together. There's a button there if you're interested in signing up for our email mail out. So you can do that, check that page periodically, join the Facebook group, and you'll never miss another event with us. So with that, I'll say last call for questions. All right. We've got one: after the kill, can I quarter the deer and pack it and leave the guts buried after the telecheck? Great question. So there's a couple different things going on here. So after you harvest your animal, and then you've tracked it and you've located it, first thing you do is fill out your harvest log, and then you can quarter it or field dress it. On public land, you just have to make sure that whatever you leave behind is not in public view. So you probably want to take it, over a little hill, or just don't leave it on a trail or on a road or where somebody driving by in their vehicle could look down and see it. So that's the protocol for public land. If you're on private land, definitely ask the landowner. And I will say that gut piles do not last long at all. There are plenty of things out there that utilize the things that we do not. So you can talk with the landowner about that. And then you have 24 hours to telecheck your deer, which you can do by either calling or going online. And I like the online version myself. It's just faster, honestly. Good question. Any others? Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, then thank you all so much for joining us for the last Field of Fork webinar in the Field of Fork webinar series. I will give you all a little heads up. We are planning on turkey webinars at least, so keep an eye out for those. And keep an eye out for your surveys as well. So you all, thank you for joining us and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. I attended the Fern Creek seminar and I really liked it.
Thanks, David. We really appreciate it. And Roger's still with us, so he was able to hear that. And maybe you were referring to the one that Jason taught too, or we'll pass it on.
And I actually got a guy there who's a retired Army Colonel, Michael, to hunt with me.
Really? That's awesome. Yes,
yeah.
I know him, and you're sure to have a good time.
Yeah, he really knows Fort Knox.
He does it a lot. I think that's something he really enjoys.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, David.
Thank you.
Well, I want to say, Becky, thank you for all your hard work the past 6 weeks on doing these webinars. It definitely is a great resource for everybody. I know I learned a lot tonight, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. I appreciate it. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to shut it down, and y'all have a good one, and good luck hunting out there. Thanks, everybody, for joining.